Hello my loves, better late than never with my February 2025 bullet journal setup. This is 2 weeks late, unfortunately. But as you guys know, if you watched my video last week, we've had some technical difficulties this month, but we're working through it, okay? It's totally fine. So if you guys didn't see the video last week, I posted a video trying acrylic markers for the first time because I actually made a February bullet journal setup using the acrylic markers. However, I had very mixed feelings about the final product. I liked the cover page a lot. I liked how the art looked, I liked how it bled into the calendar on the left. I thought it was really super cute, but I felt like the next page was very messy and I wasn't sure how much I wanted to continue using the markers in the weekly spreads. So although I had a really good time with that video and I still uploaded it and showed you guys my process trying acrylic markers for the first time, I was debating in that voiceover whether or not I was going to redo my setup the next week, and here we are the following week with a new setup. I think you guys can assume what I decided to do. I mean, I'm a perfectionist, what can you do? But I try so hard to fight the continuous urge for perfection in my bullet journal, and it's an ongoing battle with myself like every day because, you know, I always want to post content that I'm proud of and I always want to have a journal with art that I'm proud of, but also I go back and forth with trying new things and being in creative slumps, and that always leads to my art not being my favorite thing ever. Well, not always, but you know, sometimes. So I liked the art that I did last week, but I didn't know if I felt very like connected to it for my own bullet journal, and I don't know, it's a lot. I don't really have to explain myself here. I decided to do a new setup and that's just what happened. But this is actually also kind of funny, to be honest, because I made a bullet journal setup designed by a cover of a book that I've read recently that I really like. If you guys follow me on my second channel, which is called Sophie Joe, it's a reading channel, a book channel. I have so much fun over there, and I have actually vlogged the process of reading this book I'm about to mention, or that you might be able to recognize if you know what I'm talking about by this cover page. I vlogged the entire process and that video will be out, I think, in the next week or so, maybe 2 weeks by the time that you're watching this video. So again, follow me over there if you're interested in hearing more of my detailed thoughts. But this book I actually had some issues with, which is why it's kind of funny that I made it the cover page for February. But enough with the suspense. The book I'm talking about here is The Bridge Kingdom by Daniel L. Jensen. I think the cover of this, or the new cover I should clarify, of this book is absolutely stunning. Love, stunning. Okay, I think that the indie covers, and I understand that indie authors, you know, don't have as much resources to create, you know, super crazy covers, but I think the indie covers are respectfully quite ugly. But I think the new covers of the series are stunning. They are metallic. They all have this, like, I wouldn't say, it's not an oval, it's not a rectangle, like whatever this angular frame shape is on the cover page. I basically copied this exactly from the front of the book cover, and they all have floral designs, ombre, very bright colors with a like beautiful woman in the middle of it. I think the art is just gorgeous, and so I had just started this book by the time that I was sketching for this setup, and I was like, you know what, I think the cover is beautiful. My mom always tells me I should do a bullet journal theme inspired by a book I like. Why not draw February based off of this book? Another part of my thought process was I really enjoyed my January setup, which I did for Lunar New Year. It was a snake theme, and it was basically all red, orange, and black, so it was very like monochromatic as far as the color scheme. And so I thought I wanted to do something very similar for my, second February bullet journal setup of the year, by doing a very, again, monochromatic color scheme, all 1 or 2 colors in like different shades, and kind of lead into that same aesthetic again. So I thought that since this cover was mostly just blues and greens, I could do the exact same kind of idea, you know, with this cover. And once again, because the design was just so beautiful on the cover of the book, and because it just framed that part, I don't know, it's hard to explain. I feel like the design was very easy to replicate in a bullet journal because the shape looks great as a cover page because it looked great as a book cover, if that makes sense. So maybe this is an idea for you guys if you're looking for inspiration for your bullet journal. Maybe try recreating one of your favorite book covers, or maybe even in like an album cover if you like listen to music a lot, or a movie poster. I don't know, I haven't really done it before. I feel that I can remember, but I feel like this would be something I should do more in the future because I do have a lot of book covers that I really like and would be fun to recreate in my bullet journal. However, like I said, I was unfortunately having issues with The Bridge Kingdom, which is really ironic because I made my entire setup about it, and now that I finished it, I'm like, yeah, I did not like this book at all. I'm not gonna spoil too much about it because, again, I vlogged the entire process for my book channel, so if you want to see the video, it'll be out in a couple weeks. Go subscribe to Sophie Joe. But basically, I actually was reading this book, and in the most simplest of terms, I DNF'd it, which means I did not finish it. On purpose, I put it down. I said, I cannot finish this. I am so bored. And then I saw one of my favorite creators, favorite book creators, reading it, loving it. So then I got FOMO, picked it up again, and basically just listened to the majority of the rest of the book on audiobook while filming this video, ironically. So I was listening to The Bridge Kingdom while drawing The Bridge Kingdom all at once. And once I finished, I was not happy with it. Honestly, I had a lot of issues with it. It just didn't really stand out to me. You know, that Abby Lee Miller audio. He didn't stand out to me. That's how this book was to me. So although it was a very, very beautiful cover and I really, really like how the setup looks, and especially with the sketch on its own, I feel like it was really unfortunate that I just didn't like the inside of the book. But you know, that's how it goes sometimes. You can't like them all. Anyway, so let's talk about the coloring for this cover page. Like I said, I wanted to do a very monochromatic color scheme with mostly just greens and blues to kind of emulate the same idea that I had in January with reds and oranges. However, because there is a girl on this cover, I realized that I'm also adding like browns and beiges and tans, and that's because, I mean, the same thing happened on the cover page of the book, but if you have a woman, you have to like draw her realistically, I feel. So I tried to also carry the light yellowish, blondish color palette as like a secondary thing, but the majority of the setup is going to be blues and teals. Now, in hindsight, I'm thinking about it, I probably should have done the art in the setup with alcohol markers on separate paper, or even with water-based markers on separate paper, because I used a lot of saturation in this setup. You will see as I continue to just add layers and layers of color. And with water-based markers, because they're made with water and because they can really like build, they will bleed through paper if you add too many layers. Now, this is different from alcohol markers because alcohol markers will bleed through paper, even 160 GSM thick paper like my journal is, with one swipe. So I definitely can't use alcohol markers directly in my bullet journal without putting it on a separate piece of paper and like pasting it in. Water-based markers, on the other hand, you can put directly into your journal, but if you layer a lot, they will start to bleed through. And so you'll see throughout this video that I did have issues with bleeding, but I used a little bit of magic to kind of fix that. We'll talk about that a little later in this video. However, the other issue I had with my water-based markers was blending. I feel like just in general, alcohol markers blend a little smoother than water-based markers. So again, I feel like in hindsight, maybe this setup would have been done a little better with alcohol markers just to create a smoother blend and not worry about bleed through as much because I'd have to do it on a separate piece of paper anyway. That being said, I had found really, really good color matches with my water-based marker collection to the cover of the journal. I'd found some really pretty teals, light blues, a little bit of dark greens in different shades that were really quite a good match, if I do say so myself, to the cover of the book. So I felt like I really just wanted to draw directly into my journal and just screw the consequences for future me. I also felt like I wanted to do, again, something very similar to January because I loved my January setup. So since I did my January setup directly into my bullet journal with water-based markers, I figured I could do the same thing here and just like cross my fingers that it wouldn't bleed through too much. It did, like I said, but we'll get there. As far as the cover page though, I had a lot of issues, or not issues, I had a lot of indecision, is a better word for it, with how I wanted to color everything. I mean, okay, it's one thing to look at a cover page and see, okay, her hair looks like this, and the mountains look like this, and then the birds are here, the stairs are here, etc. But it's a complete other thing to replicate it in my bullet journal, and I feel like sketching, fine liner, that's easy for me. Like I can very easily copy an image in a sketchbook or in my bullet journal by like just looking and comparing the two. That's not where I have issues. I have more issues with figuring out how to blend color, how to add color slowly, and because it's like do it once and you can't mess up because you can't undo it kind of situation, it was a little bit stressful for me. The stairs especially were a point of contention. I was like very nervous on how I wanted to recreate them, how I wanted to add the perfect amount of shadows, and also give the illusion of depth without having to spend too much time on actually creating each individual stair. So it ended up just being like stripes of light to dark, light to dark, light to dark to kind of emulate shadows going down different steps, and then it goes up into her hair. It's not a very realistic drawing, but again, I was just copying directly from the cover of the journal, so I liked how they styled the elements of the stairs, the hair, the mountains in the back, the different palm leaves twirling around a strand of her hair in the bottom right corner of this frame. Anyway, I liked the framing a lot, so I wanted to recreate it directly, even if it isn't very realistic. But I think that honestly, after a lot of back and forth, a lot of work, like I said, the blending was an issue. And that's especially prevalent in the sky. I'll see you in just a minute, but I think that the stairs, the mountains, and the girl look really good. If I can pat myself on the back, I am. Like, I think that they turned out really great. The sky was my main issue, I think, here as far as what I'm not so happy with. And I say that in a way, like, I'm not trying to, like, you know, put myself down. I'm just like trying to be very analytical about my art and, you know, see what am I good at, what am I not so good at, what can I improve for the future kind of thing. I feel like the sky was very light, and so I wish I added more darkness, because you'll see that I add some darkness towards the very tippity top, but I wish it kind of carried down more to balance out the amount of darkness at the bottom of this frame. And then I also think that just because it was water-based markers, they just simply don't blend as well as alcohol markers. So part of me wishes that I did this in alcohol markers yet again, just to create more of a smoother blend. But if you blur your eyes, I think the blend is still very nice. And overall, like, the picture is still really good. You know, I'm really happy with this. I'm especially happy with how the woman's hair and face looks. I mean, the character in the book's name is Lana, so I suppose we can just call her Lana. I really like how her hair turned out. I like how I could add a little depth. I feel like blonde hair is a hard color to accomplish, because it's a mix between like yellowy brown, obviously, but it can't be too brown or it's a brunette, and it can't be too yellow or it's like a not real character. Like, it's hard to find the right color to do hair with when I'm drawing blonde characters, so I think it was a pretty good successful color match that I found for this one. The last little bit is to color in the outside of this like frame design. I used the same colors for her hair and then added dark shadows every now and then to kind of create a reflective or fake reflective texture. I was debating using like actual metallic markers like gel pens to add a real shiny effect to this bullet journal spread, but none of them were the exact color I wanted, unfortunately. However, I still think the idea of like having a very light color and then streaks of dark every now and then to kind of represent the shadows in the metallic-y surface are just as effective in creating a fake shiny surface. So it's almost like the frame is a piece of bronze metal or gold metal that is actually reflective, but it just gives that illusion with where I place the shadows and the highlights. Now we will come back to this spread at the very end. I did have one more change I wanted to make to everything, but I think that overall it is pretty good. And now let's move on to the next spread, which is going to be my academic planning spread. Now you can immediately see when you turn over the paper the amount of bleeding that bled through from the cover page. Like I said, I was kind of just screwing the consequences until I turned the page and realized that I'd have to do some magic to kind of get this spread to look good. But I was going to focus on that in a minute. We're just going to have to ignore the fact that you can see half of the sky from the first page back here. Give me time, I will fix it. But first I'm going to be doing the fine liner. So like I said, this entire setup has been inspired by the cover or the book, The Bridge Kingdom, and I was trying to use different elements all over the cover and the back cover of the paperback. So one of the things that were actually framing the picture that I drew on the front page were these very tall columns of, I guess, foliage surrounded by, once again, that gold frame-like design. So I wanted to just kind of cut the design in half. The main circle-y, it's not even a circle, the main portion, like where the girl is, was from the cover page, and then the tall branches and vines of flowers were going to be for the academic planning page, because for some reason, I think it's just so satisfying to have a symmetrical spread, or to have a spread where the art is like completely surrounding the stuff in the middle. I don't know, I think it's like gorgeous to look at. To be honest, it's probably my favorite spread of the entire setup, and I know you haven't seen the finished product yet, but just trust me when I say this, I think pencil sketch was good, my vision was good, and it turned out exactly how I wanted it to. So I guess just like, I don't know, be excited because it's gonna look great. Now that the line art is done, however, I was going to do some of my, like I said, bullet journal magic. So I want to talk about ways to kind of cover up mistakes in your bullet journal or to cover up bleeding, since we are obviously dealing with that very heavily right here. So one thing I like to do for small mistakes is cover it up with white gel pen. Usually it's very opaque and you can cover up, you know, black pen, things like that. But obviously here there were very large swaths of color that would not have looked good with just gel pen covering it, right? So then my second idea was to use a white acrylic marker. In fact, the same markers that I used last week. And I actually did use this for a lot of like little touch-ups, especially where the outside of the boxes were not going to be shown. This makes no sense. Basically, I'm going to be cutting out extra white paper, gluing it on top of where I'm going to be drawing the columns for my academic planner. And then when the bleeding gets super close to where the flowers are, aka where I couldn't cover it up with paper because I'm going to be doing the art there, that's where I used the acrylic markers just to do the little small detailed parts. So it looks kind of rough now, but when I cover it with the little white piece of paper, it's now like almost perfectly invisible. And then just a little bit of hints of greenish blue on the very left will be covered again with more acrylic marker. I feel like that's one of those mediums that is best to build. So I add one layer, wait till it dries, add another layer, wait till it dries, and add another layer, and that'll help over time just make it thicker and more invisible. And then lastly, whenever I do the final coloring for the vine like columns on the left and right, it'll hide the bleeding even more because the eye is drawn to the darkness of the edges of the bullet journal, not to any little mistakes in the middle, if that makes sense. So again, it was rough at the beginning, but you will see by the flip through, by the very end of this video, that there are going to be basically no issues. I think I did a pretty good job covering it up. Now, I did only add an extra sheet of paper to the left side of the spread because I was covering where the cover page was, right? Now, on the next spread that I haven't actually gotten to yet, I am going to add more art. As you know, I didn't learn my lesson. I still drew directly into my bullet journal. So I do have a little bit of bleeding through that will show at the very end from the right side of the spread. I should have just cut my losses ahead of time and added an extra sheet of paper on both sides to kind of double up protection on both sides instead of just the left side. But again, you live and you learn. I ended up adding more paper once I finished filming, but we'll get to that later. It's not really important right now. The point is, if you have big issues in your bullet journal that you need to fix, especially like bleeding through issues, things like that, it's very simple just to cut out a spread from the very end of the bullet journal. That way you know it's the exact same color paper with the exact same type of dots, and then just cut it to the size you want and then glue or tape it in, and it's basically seamless. I think it looks really good, and it's a great way to hide any large mistakes. Now let's talk coloring process for these flowers, because to be honest, in the speed through they look so satisfying to color in, but this did take me like at least an hour to do just the art for this spread alone. So basically what I did was I had about 3 different shades of blue, 3 different shades of green, 2 shades of the blondie brown colors, and then a couple like really dark greenish turquoise colors. So for every leaf and flower, I had a section that was lighter and a section that's darker. I mean, you can see that kind of now, how the center of the flowers are lighter than the outside, how the tips of the leaves are lighter than the base of each leaf. So I would take my first 3 colors, it's about 2 light blues and 1 light green, and kind of just add, I don't know, blobs of color. They didn't have to be perfect. They were very modeled, very random, but I usually would add just, you know, stripes of color very messily towards where the lighter sections were going to be. And then I would take my 3 darkest colors, so 2 darker greens and 1 dark blue, and I would do the deeper shadows in the middle of the flowers, which I think are like hibiscus flowers, in all of the leaves, things like that, towards the vines, the roots, things like that. And then I would go in afterwards with kind of the mid-tone green or blue and blend out any harsh lines between the light and the dark. Now when you look up close, there are a lot more just random swipes of color that are not very intentional. It's just all very like place things here, place things there, etc., etc. My main point of reference was that I assumed the light source was on the top, so most of the leaves and stuff are lighter towards the top, darker towards the bottom. The flowers are more lighter towards the middle, etc., etc. It's not perfect, it's not completely realistic or accurate, but from far away, when you blow your eyes, it looks like a beautiful gradient, and that's what the intention is. So when I do bullet journal art, I don't have everything be exactly perfect. It's just about creating that beautiful illusion. And then the last thing that I think pulled the illusion together really well was adding that super dark background behind all the flowers. That was honestly my favorite part. Not only is it incredibly satisfying to do, just coloring in all the little sections in between all the flowers, like a little coloring book with a super dark green, but it was also great because I just love the contrast between the colors of the leaves and the flowers and then the background. Before I start coloring in the green, you think that the leaves are really dark, but then when I add the green behind it, they pop up almost like, not neon, but they almost glow. Like I feel like they're just so much more emphasized. The color is so much more saturated when you contrast it with a dark background. So this part was why I love this spread so much. I think it's so satisfying, and the final result, I mean, again, pat myself on the back, but I think it's pretty gorgeous. Alright, so we are in the last spread, and at this point I was filming for 4+ hours. It was getting late in the day, sun was setting, so I was kind of chasing light here. So if you notice any differences in the lighting, that is why, but I was trying my best to go really fast. I knew that this spread had a minimal amount of art on it, so I was just gonna do the bare minimum, make it work, and continue. But one idea I had, which I think is actually super awesome, is use the same shape of frame that I had on the cover page for the expenses tracker. So I basically just drew the exact same measurements on this set of the spread instead, and then added a chart in the middle instead of the art. And then there's just flowers, leaves surrounding the outside of the expenses tracker to pull it into the theme. On the right side of the spread, we have these two little like twigs, maybe sprigs is a better word, I don't know, of flowers that are kind of draping down over the habit tracker. I'm doing 6 habits this month, and I was honestly debating doing a more detailed tracker with like health trackers and stuff as well. I didn't have time or the energy to make another spread, so I did not, but maybe in March you guys will see a more detailed tracking system. As for right now, just expenses on the left and 6 habits are fine for me on the right. And by the way, these sprigs of flowers that I drew are taken from the back side of the paperback on the back cover. So again, I took all my inspiration for all of the details off of the cover of a book, literally. Like I almost directly copied it. I will try to find the name of the artist or the graphic designer who designed the cover. I want to give them credit where credit is due because I obviously took a lot of ideas from them for my setup. But yeah, I'm just really happy with how I replicated the cover of the book. I think it looks really good. One more thing I wanted to mention is the font that I use for the word expenses. It's basically just a very tall block, like tall and skinny block font, sans serif kind of thing. But I was trying to emulate the exact same font that they used for the cover, again, of the book, The Bridge Kingdom. It's a very simple font. There's not much to it, which is why it was very easy to emulate. But I feel like too often in my bullet journal, I just rely on calligraphy for everything, which is great because I taught myself how to do calligraphy. I might as well use my skills now that I know how to do it, of course. But I think it's fun to try different fonts and try to replicate them in your bullet journal. So I did do that every now and then. Like you can see here, expenses on the left was with the special font, but habits on the right was in calligraphy. So trying to balance, you know, doing both, because it does take longer to sketch out the fonts than it does just to pull out a calligraphy pen and write with calligraphy, because I've been doing it for so many years now. It's more like second nature, to be honest. But it's something that I also tried on the first page with the calendar, and the cover page I also did those in the block font. So we'll see if I stick to this more often. It's kind of more rare that I spend time on fonts rather than spending time on like actual spread design or artwork and stuff like that. But I think it does pay off because it means that this setup stands out from the other ones, because I tried a new thing and I tried to, again, make it special, make it stand out by adding a special font. So that's that. And the last thing I want to mention, I think I already said that with the font, but one more thing, okay? And that's symmetry. It was very, not difficult, but it was kind of tricky trying to make sure that everything was symmetrical in the setup, specifically with the academic planning page and also this habit tracker page where the flowers are mirroring each other. I would just recommend taking advantage of the dot grid on the bullet journal. Count if this flower on the left is 3 dots in, then the one on the right has to be 3 dots in as well. And just using the grid as reference is really helpful in creating a almost symmetrical design. It's not completely perfect, and that's totally okay, but the idea is there. All right. Now my last little edit was to make the stripes on the calendar a little darker. I didn't like how they were all different colors. I wanted to make them all that super dark teal that I used for the deep shadows in the academic planning page. You can't really see the days of the week like the numbers after I did that, but I can see them. You just can't see them on camera. So just take my word for it. I promise you they're still there. Anyway, now we're finally here to the final flip through. I hope you guys really enjoyed the setup, even though it's a couple weeks late. As you'll see, the second spread does have a little bit of bleeding on it, but like I said, I will go in and fix that once I finish filming, don't you worry. I think that overall this spread looks really good, and I'm really grateful for it because as you can see, my fingers are like actually green. I spent so long filming and making art for this, so I think the time actually paid off though. I have a really exciting video coming next week, so I hope you guys will subscribe and stick around for that. In the meantime, check out my last video, which is here on the screen, talking about how I use acrylic markers for the first time. It was a really fun experience, and with that, I will see you guys next Saturday.